There is something rotten in the state of Arizona. Republicans have corrupted the transportation system of Maricopa County for their own petty political purposes. Take Republican Tyler Pace. Appointed by the Republican Speaker of the House to the Transportation Policy Committee in Maricopa County in 2023, Tyler Pace does not give a shit about transportation in Maricopa County. In fact, I have video evidence of how little of a shit Tyler Pace gives.
Tyler Pace? 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 Tyler Pace?
17 out of 20 meetings he's been eligible to attend, he has missed, absconded, fled the coop, fled the country, possibly, for all we know. His epic truancy is so great that if you go back and watch that 40-second clip, you'll actually see logos get updated in real time. Pace is emblematic of the Republican approach to transit in Maricopa County. Neglect for the actual management of transit, but actively against it when someone tries to improve it. State Republicans are trying to sabotage public transit in Maricopa County. And this is hardly the only example. Hell, this isn't even the only example of a legislatively appointed Republican basically bailing on this particular job. There are two other appointed Republicans over the same time period who also have pretty terrible attendance records, although none as admittedly bad as Tyler Pace. Which is terrible, but why am I acting like the world's meanest attendance taker? I don't like Prop 479. I made a video about Prop 479 before the last election, and I was against it, but it passed anyway. So I'm going to briefly go over some of the objections I had before going into how Republicans are going to use Prop 479 to fuck over mass transit in Maricopa County. Also, I don't want to overhype it, but aliens enter into the equation at some point. Anyway, Prop 479 was the renewal of a half-cent sales tax that funds transit that needs to be renewed every 20 years. It's existed since the 80s, but this time around, Republicans decided to get clever and tinkered with it. Tinkered with it how, you might ask? This dude changed the speed limit in Maricopa County because he wanted to drive faster to work. Audits will be more difficult to get a hold of from now on, and there are 2 separate light rail expansion bans. Yeah, 2. Not 1, 2. The first bans Valley Metro, the transit agency in Maricopa County, from using Prop 479 money to expand light rail, which is the largest source of funding Valley Metro receives, so it's a uniform ban on anything big. The second one bans the light rail system from being expanded by other means around the state capital. That's right, no more Prop 479 money, which is what was used to originally create the light rail network, and if you do happen to find some money, you can't expand it to the state capital. I think the Republican legislators who wrote Prop 479 might have a bit of a complex about light rail. In case you need more evidence about that, here's a clip of a Republican legislator explaining what transit is to him.
I'm one of those ones he's talking about that likes a certain amount of transit. But when I consider transit, light rail and trolley is not any part of transit, or shouldn't be any part of transit. When I look at some of the things that have happened, like in Mesa, for example, where they bought 5 trolleys for $5.5 million, they could have bought 66 buses for that. And those buses, they're not locked down to a path like these transit things are. Like your light rails and your trolleys are. Those things are locked down. If something wants to move, you got to tear up the roads all over again. $245 million per mile. That's outrageous. Outrageous. There's no way that you can ever convince me that that is something that the east side or the west side wants. Nobody wants this except the people that are building it. So if we want buses. I'm good with buses. Buses can move around. You can. Phoenix could have bought. They just went out and bought those 100 electric buses. That's way better than light rail. Way better than light rail. Even though I think that's a waste of money. Still, it's a far cry better than light rail.
Goth Colonel Sanders is very much representative of the GOP position on transit. Light rail? Bad. Buses? Good. Except that's not really true either. BRT, the most efficient type of bus route, is also verboten. The language in the proposition essentially demands building new roads to build BRT, which, that's not going to happen. You may as well build light rail for that cost. So the GOP in Arizona has targeted transit with Prop 479, but there is a specific manner in which it has targeted transit that irritates me that prompted this video. Audits. Specifically, audits of the fare box recovery ratio. Fare box recovery ratio is the amount of money paid for ridership divided by operations costs. If there is $10 paid in fares and operations cost $100, the ratio is 10%. Make sense? Good. Alright, so Prop 479 created a new requirement. In fiscal year 27, Valley Metro needs to legally have a 10% fare box recovery ratio. In FY 29, it's 15, and in FY 32, it's 20%. There are consequences that we will talk about later, but let's back out for a second and see how likely it is that Valley Metro hits those numbers. FY 24 is the most recent year we have numbers for Valley Metro, so we can fairly judge how likely they are to hit those numbers. Drumroll, please. 6.2% system-wide. A few caveats, but it's accurate enough for our purposes. That's really far away from the 10% it has to hit in FY 27. The system was close to hitting those numbers pre-COVID, but we live in a post-COVID world where every transit agency is reeling from the crash of March 2020. What I'm saying is that Republicans have set up a scenario where the most likely outcome is failure. And they did it on purpose. Remember when I explained how Republicans had rigged Prop 479 so that it prevented expansion of light rail? Well, guess which mode of transportation has the highest fare box recovery rate for Valley Metro? Light rail! Yes, light rail. What a coincidence. Republicans just happened to ban the most successful transit mode from expanding. To put the numbers on screen, light rail on its own actually has a chance of hitting that FY 27 10% fare box recovery ratio on time. It's a lot closer than the buses that the Republicans were so high on.
So if we want buses. I'm good with buses.
So I think it's safe to say Republicans have designed a test, this fare box recovery audit, that is by design impossible for Valley Metro to pass. Back at the Transportation Policy Committee, all these Republican plants are going to go apeshit the second the fare box recovery audits do not hit their marks, which they are most assuredly not going to because, again, of the actions of Republicans. So I've already introduced you to the no-show crowd, where 60% attendance is considered a miraculous number. Let's talk about the other Republicans on the board, more recent appointments. Let's start with Kevin McCarthy, the head of the Arizona Tax Research Association. He was recently appointed under a new seat created by Prop 479. His job as head of the Arizona Tax Research Association is to show up at the legislature and say, "Harumph! Taxes are bad. Rich people should pay less money to the government. Harumph!" There's more to it than that, but, is there really? No, there's 100 of these dumb motherfuckers running around, and I refuse to pretend like there is some sort of fundamental difference between Kevin McCarthy at the Arizona Tax Research Association and any of the other stupid organizations who do exactly the same thing, like the Goldwater Institute, the Arizona Liberty Network, the Common Sense Institute, or the Arizona Free Enterprise Club. Same shit, different bucket. But hey, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Kevin McCarthy isn't an unfeeling tool of rich interests who does nothing but tirelessly toil to make them richer at the expense of the rest of Arizona. Fun fact, this isn't Kev's only seat in government. No, he's on the board of trustees for the Arizona State Retirement System. Oh, how wonderful. Kevin McCarthy has an opportunity to show what he has to offer. What will his contribution to public service be? So let's see what Big Kev has to offer retirees fighting for the little guy. What did Kev do at the most recent meeting?
Will the following individuals please confirm your presence at the meeting by stating here as I call your name? Mr. Rene Guillen,
Here.
Mr. Michael Miller,
Here.
Ms. Diane Landis,
Here.
Mr. Kevin McCarthy is excused.
Are you fucking kidding me? Do any of these clowns go to meetings? Okay, using the same time horizon of since January 1st, 2023, how many Board of Trustees meetings have there been, and how many has Kevin missed? Okay, there have been 13 meetings of the trustees of the Arizona State Retirement System. How many did Kevin attend? 5. He attended 5. If you don't want to do the job, don't take the job. Christ, it's not that hard. Okay, so Johnny Puppet for the Rich can't manage to show up to committee meetings, and even when he does, he'd probably make a clown of himself, yelling about something he doesn't understand, like when farebox audit recovery numbers are reported. Because while Kevin does show up at state legislative meetings to comment on pending legislation, because he does, Kev did not actually care about Prop 479. Him and his org had absolutely no position on the bill that put it on the ballot while it was in the legislature, SB 1102. I checked the newsletters, they didn't have any position when it was being voted on. Which is kind of weird, right? I mean, it's a tax, a pretty big one, but the Arizona Tax Research Association didn't bother to take a position, and now he's in a position of oversight for something his group didn't even care to take a position on. I mean, they didn't even take a position when it was up for a vote in the legislature. It's weird, it's all kinds of weird. But let's go from kinda weird to lots of weird. Alright, I said the Republican state legislature could appoint seats on the Transportation Policy Committee, right? Well, these aren't just random seats. These are supposed to represent specific interests. For example, our absent friend Tyler Pace is supposed to represent region-wide transport interests. Too bad he can't transport himself to these meetings. Am I right? Okay, but that's what he's supposed to represent. Prop 479 put a bunch more seats on the committee for Republicans to have. It upped the number to 10 out of 28. A lot of seats for people who probably aren't going to show up. Prop 479 added the seat Kev was appointed to, one for a taxpayer organization, which is code for conservative, because conservatives think they are the only ones who pay taxes. Whatever, let's talk about another new appointee whose seat doesn't really match the person appointed to it. Jay Beeber, who has been appointed to represent the public. One small problem with this, though. Beeber's not from Arizona. He's a car activist, more a gadfly really, from California. Yeah, no shocker, the most granola-looking motherfucker you've ever seen in your life is from California. He's been a candidate for LA City Council twice, and he is the head of Safer Streets LA, which, to be clear, is not an organization based out of Arizona. Now, a kinder person may credit him as being from Arizona, showing his LinkedIn page and saying, look, it shows he lives in Phoenix. I would reply, the same motherfucking webpage shows him as the current head of Safer Streets LA, which is, again, not in Arizona. Some of you may be wondering why I have such a problem with Senate President Warren Peterson appointing a Californian to represent Arizonans on the Transportation Policy Committee, and I'll retort, I don't, Republicans fucking do. Like, I'm not joking, this is not hyperbole. Republicans treat California like a foreign goddamn country. Here, listen to a clip about a bunch of conservatives getting their panties in a knot over a proposed wind farm, and let's see if you can pinpoint what they are using as a wedge issue.
And we've been told by Rexall, we've been told by these people, that all of the energy is going to California.
But at the same time, passing this bill does not stop these foreign and domestic utility companies from providing alternative power to our state or to California.
And why are we doing this for California? Send them to California.
California, or the Mordor of the West, if you will, is going to steal our souls using a wind farm to power their Satan machine that'll make everyone trans or whatever the fuck they are complaining about today. Yeah, so you can see why I was somewhat stunned that this hippie-looking dude from California was Warren Peterson's first choice to represent the people of Arizona. I mean, here's Peterson bragging about fighting California transit policy.
Hi, this is Arizona Senate President Warren Peterson. As many of you know, I've been involved in over 60 lawsuits on behalf of the legislature. We just won a big one against California.
We've beaten them in court, and now it's time to appoint this carpetbagger to be in charge of Maricopa County Transit. And remember to vote for Warren Peterson for Attorney General next year. He stands for Arizonans by appointing Californians. So what can we expect from Jay Beeber on the Transportation Policy Committee? Well, a Streets Blog Los Angeles article about Jay Beeber titled Valley Gadfly Rages Against Planned Metro Bus Speed Improvements gives hints when it describes Beeber and his opposition to a local bus rapid transit, or BRT, project. To quote, the anti-BRT flyer is being pushed by Jay Beeber, a perennial marginal city council candidate who achieved some notoriety in fighting parking citation practices. Earlier this month, Beeber lost another campaign in LA City Council District 12 special election. So he's highly negative about public transit. Probably not a good thing for a panel that oversees transit in Maricopa County. But it gets worse. Beeber is also the head of an organization called the National Motorists Association. What does he do as head of this organization? Well, I'll bet you're expecting me to say something hyperbolic like, oh yes, and as head of the National Motorists Association, he advocates for such common sense things like assuming school bus drivers are entrapping innocent motorists by tricking them into breaking the law. And that's crazy. I would never say something like that. That's insane. Why would you think that? I don't need to say that. I have a video of him saying that.
There are all these reasons why people might make a mistake or why they might get caught in sort of an entrapment situation. For example, if the bus driver doesn't illuminate the yellow lights, for a long enough time before they actually stop the bus and illuminate the red lights. That could cause somebody to inadvertently violate the stop arm and the red lights. Sometimes the bus driver actually illuminates the red lights even before the bus stops moving. We've seen this in a number of videos. So there's a lot of technical reasons why these violations either they shouldn't be occurring in the first place because of engineering flaws and flaws in the fact that a lot of this is manual as opposed to automated. But the bottom line is, if we were just ticketing the people who are actually doing something dangerous, we would not see this many tickets.
Fun, right? I bet you've never looked at a school bus driver and thought, narc. This from a Florida news story about 61,000 tickets being issued for driving around school buses while kids are getting off. And Jay's position of, if we are just ticketing the people who are actually doing something dangerous, we would not see this many tickets, is not something I'd agree with. Really, anybody who's ever driven a car would agree with. I don't know if Jay Beeber's ever been on the road. Maybe it's not a requirement to be a car activist, but I see that shit all the time. I constantly see people swerving around buses trying to beat their flashing red lights and failing. It's harrowing. Also, if my and your anecdotal evidence isn't enough, perhaps an annual study would be sufficient, because, they fund studies for everything, why wouldn't they study this? The National Association of State Directors of People Transport Services, or Bus Drivers Association, because I ain't saying that ever again, conducts an annual survey. So let's do a quick check. Jay Beeber was complaining about 61,000 drivers getting ticketed for illegally passing buses in Florida and saying it sounds unrealistic. Does this number sound right when compared with this annual survey? Survey says 45.3 million projected illegal passings per year. So yeah, no, that sounds reasonable, and it sounds like Jay Beeber is full of shit and probably not the best fit for Transportation Policy Committee. Unless you like someone saying that maybe your kid had it coming when they get run over at a school bus stop. But let's get weird. I mean, conservative carpetbagger from California and Arizona is already plenty weird, but I also said he's a gadfly. So did Streets Blog. This wasn't some cute aside. He's 90% media appearances. He does a ton. And right now, I could rattle off a bunch of weird right-wing podcasts he's appeared on, or I could just jump straight to the punchline and say within the last year, Jay Beeber was on Coast to Coast AM with George Norrie. I'm going to pause to let that sink in because, for a couple people, they were not expecting that twist and it just kind of broke their brain. For everybody else who's wondering why Coast to Coast AM is such a big deal, allow me to answer in the most succinct way possible. Aliens. Yeah, Jay Beeber, car activist, conservative, Californian, and Transportation Policy Committee member, was on the Aliens Are Real radio call-in show. To give you a sense of how fundamentally weird this is, allow me to read the description of the other guy who was on the show that day, Chris Bledsoe. UFO experiencer, Chris Bledsoe, recalled his various close encounters in North Carolina and how in the aftermath he was healed from a long, debilitating health condition. In 2007, when he was on a fishing trip, he saw a huge object glowing orange that had tips of fire shooting off of it. And then second and third objects came into view. He experienced an episode of missing time. As the group fled the scene, Bledsoe said strange lights were following his truck on the highway, and they thought an alien invasion was taking place. Just a free bit of advice, if you see flashing lights in your rearview mirror, assume it's a cop car and not Klingons. But that is weird. Car activist Jay Beeber, in the process of promoting his ideology, let's say, went on the nation's premier Aliens and Ghosts radio show. And there on Touched by an Alien, the radio show, Jay said the most interesting thing.
The things that we fight about are the unfair policies that the government is imposing on us, which leads to a lot of these behaviors because people are already frustrated because the government intentionally is creating traffic congestion, unfortunately, and that's going to make people a lot more angry because they sometimes have to be somewhere and they can't get there because somebody, some government official decided it was better for you to be on a bus and they want to make your commute a lot more difficult.
Yeah, I wonder who the motherfucking bureaucrat that decided everyone had to use only buses was. Who was that, Jay? Who did it? Because it wasn't goddamn Democrats. It was Republicans. They banned expansion of light rail. It wasn't a Democrat who said this.
So if we want buses. I'm good with buses.
It was a Republican, and it was a majority opinion among them. So I don't have high hopes for the Republican plans on the Transportation Policy Committee. I don't see George Jetson and the empty chair boys as fighting for the truth. Instead, what I see happening is, when Valley Metro fails these farebox recovery audits, I see Republicans making a big commotion that does two things. 1, it reinforces the Republican attack that blue cities cannot be trusted to govern themselves. 2, it justifies future attempts at Republican meddling. They'll just wave their hands at the failed farebox recovery audits and talk about how poorly managed Valley Metro is because they couldn't pass a arbitrarily set standard that was obviously too high. And all that's annoying. Jay Beeber, the empty chairs, Republican posturing, all that irritates me. And then we get to what comes next. After the recovery farebox audit fails, and it will, what are the consequences of that? Well, from the Prop 479 ballot measure, if the farebox recovery audits fail, then Valley Metro must show that other monies make up the difference. Prop 479 is not the only source of money for Valley Metro. It is the largest one, but there are others, mainly in the form of federal funds and contributions from member cities. And I mean, it would have to be. Like, even if these things operate at a deficit, the money that is paid, that is the deficit, has to come from somewhere, right? I mean, it's not magic. So these monies were already picking up the slack. In other words, it's just a big press release. Republicans wanted Valley Metro to admit that in the event of shortfalls, the slack is picked up by the constituent cities that are served by Valley Metro. It's just another fuck you to the people of Maricopa County by forcing them to admit that transit isn't performing up to the standards set by Republicans who don't live in Maricopa County. And I just really hate Prop 479 and the weirdos on the Transportation Policy Committee. If you can't make at least 75% of the meetings in a year, resign. That goes from Kevin McCarthy on the Arizona State Retirement System Trustees Board, as well as for Lost in Space Mr. Pace. Resign, you clearly have no place on this board. If you're going to legally mandate a seat on a committee represent a certain group of people, such as Arizonans, at least try to appoint someone from Arizona. And definitely don't appoint a guy just because you heard him on your favorite Aliens radio show. Christ, I can't imagine the shit show that is going to be Warren Peterson's Attorney General campaign. I wonder what person from California he's going to bring in to run it. Gavin Newsom? Finally, for everyone who's going to run these stupid farebox recovery audit stories starting around fall of FY27, don't fall for the bait. Add context. Explain it in the context of nationwide trends in transit. Explain that Republicans have handicapped Valley Metro and that's why the numbers aren't being hit. Don't just let grandstanding idiots who show up once a year for meetings control the conversation, because that route ends in one place. Valley Metro being run by statewide Republicans. I'm History Sock, and in space no one can hear you scream.